Morning, everyone. We're going to commence our proceedings, so I invite you all to stand for the playing of the national anthem. Please be seated. I love that anthem, and I really do love that video of the anthem. I hope I'm not the only one. It's a beautiful day indeed when we gather to thoughtfully examine the well-being of families in Jamaica, particularly our children and women. My name is Kamisha Swaby, and it will be my honor to guide you through today's agenda. For those colleagues and members of the public unable to attend in person, please note that this event is being live streamed on the following YouTube channels: GIS TV, PBC Jamaica, UNICEF Jamaica, and the PIOJ. Additionally, you can follow the event on UNICEF Jamaica's Instagram platform. Recordings of today's proceedings will be made available on these platforms after the event concludes. To the Honorable Favour Williams, Minister of Education and Youth, along with the distinguished directors from the ministry, Dr. Wayne Henry, Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, and the esteemed members of the technical teams at the PIOJ, Mr. Dennis Zulu, UN Resident Coordinator in Jamaica, Ms. Olga Isaza, leading the UNICEF Jamaica Country Office, together with Deputy Representative Mohammed Muhyiddin, and our UNICEF colleagues, as well as partners from the wider United Nations network in Jamaica. Mr. Anton Edmonds, IDB General Manager, Country Department, Caribbean Group, and Country Representative in Jamaica, and the representatives from the Inter-American Development Bank. Dr. Deborah Duperley-Pinks, representing the Canadian High Commissioner. Ms. Carol Coy, Director General of the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, and the members of Statting and our statistical research community. Dr. Nadine Williams, Director of Health Services, Planning and Integration, representing the Minister of Health and Wellness today. Representatives from the medical and public health communities. Professor Audrey Henry Lee, Pro Vice Chancellor, Graduate Studies and Research at the University of the West Indies, Mona. Development practitioners across ministries, departments, agencies, non-governmental organizations, and charitable foundations, or friends in the media. The children and women present here today, and all our distinguished guests, both here with us and joining online. A very warm welcome to the presentation of findings of the Jamaica Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey 2022. Good morning, everyone. Now, the Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey, MIX, is a cornerstone of our commitment to ensuring the welfare and progress of Jamaica's women and children are at the forefront. The insights shared today will spotlight the critical areas needing our attention for policy and program development within the government and our society at large. The full report will be accessible through the websites of our partner agencies, PIOJ, Statting, and UNICEF. Today will be interactive, and so the screens all around in the room are active. Your engagement is essential. We invite you to participate in an anonymous poll during the presentation of findings, and you can please prepare for that by scanning the QR code, which will be shown on the screen, to access the Slido platform. Doing this now will ensure you're set to take part once the presentation of findings begins. So, taking a moment. Lots of digital natives here. I would say all digital natives here. Yes? Fantastic. And our guest online. Now, leading our esteemed roster of speakers is Dr. Wayne Henry, Director General of the PIOJ, who will offer his insights. Dr. Henry, an accomplished economist, has made significant contributions in various capacities, including academia at the University of the West Indies, as a special advisor to the World Bank and Scotiabank Jamaica, as well as to ministers of government. As the Director General of the PIOJ, he has been instrumental in guiding and overseeing critical areas such as macroeconomy, sustainability, and socioeconomic development. We've all gotten our QR codes, so please join me in welcoming Dr. Wayne Henry.
Madam Moderator, Mrs. Kamisha Swaby, the Honorable Favour Williams, MP, Minister of Education and Youth, Mr. Dennis Zulu, UN Resident Coordinator in Jamaica, Ms. Olga Isaza, Representative of UNICEF in Jamaica, Mr. Antoine Edmonds, the General Manager, Caribbean Country Department and Country Representative for Jamaica of the IDB, Dr. Nadine Williams, Director, Health Services, Planning and Integration of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Ms. Jacqueline Montague Small, the National Mix Consultant, Dr. Deborah DePurley Pinks of the Canadian Embassy, Mrs. Carol Coy, Director General of Statin, members of the diplomatic community, especially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I always say it twice for some reason. Good morning. And a man was in a restaurant and ordered root beer. And when the waiter brought the order, he tasted and said, "This is beer. I specifically ordered root beer because I don't drink beer." And the waiter said, "I actually gave you root beer, sir. The problem is the glass is square." So let me begin by thanking you all for accepting the invitation to be a part of the launch of the Jamaica 2022 Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey Mix Report. The Government of Jamaica, through the Planning Institute of Jamaica, PIOJ, is pleased to have collaborated with UNICEF Jamaica, the IDB, and Statin in producing the fourth mix for Jamaica. The PIOJ relies heavily on data in the development planning process and in tracking the country's progress towards our national development goals. As a country, we need all Jamaicans to be empowered to achieve their fullest potential. Jamaica's previous mix were fielded in 2000, 2005, and 2011, making the 2022 mix long overdue. Children are living in wide-ranging conditions and exposed to many factors that influence their life chances. A complex set of factors affect their living conditions and predispose them to vulnerabilities that have immediate and long-term consequences for the quality of their lives. Children face development risks when there is, for example, inadequate nutrition, poor education, an unsafe environment, poor parenting, and inadequate social amenities and healthcare services. It is therefore critical that as we strive towards developed country status, we continually assess the status of children as a development imperative. MIX is a valuable tool designed to do just that, to collect data on key indicators that are used to assess the situation of women and children. In the end, we are all committed to promoting their welfare, particularly as we implement Vision 2030 Jamaica and Agenda 2030, which seeks to leave no one behind. Policies and programs need to be informed by good quality data. Therefore, the PIOJ would like to thank everyone that contributed to the success of this process. We all have vital roles in advancing Jamaica's sustainable development, and let us all continue to work together to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. And let me take time to acknowledge the team, the hardworking team at the PIOJ. And I'm always privileged to be associated with them. And as I see, as they push harder and harder in the more difficult and challenging times, I use every opportunity to express appreciation. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Thank you, Dr. Henry. Now, MIX is a flagship research program of UNICEF globally. And it is my honor to introduce Ms. Olga Isaza, the representative from the UNICEF Jamaica Country Office, to share her remarks on this vital program. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Olga Isaza.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Kamisha Kelly, moderator, Honorable Faiba Williams, Minister of Education and Youth, Dr. Wayne Henry, Director General of Planning Institute of Jamaica, Ms. Carol Coy, Director General of the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, Ms. Anton Edmonds, IDB General Manager, Country Department Caribbean Group and Country Representative in Jamaica, Mr. Dennis Zulu, Resident Coordinator of UN, other development partners, colleagues from the UN, members of the media, distinguished guests, especially young and children people. Evidence-based information, scientific information, and accurate information about children in Jamaica are what we are launching and celebrating today. Never before had trusted information been more important than today. In an era of disinformation and misinformation, disseminating accurate data is not only a commitment, but a duty. It is also a signal of bravery, and that is why I want to start by congratulating the government of Jamaica for conducting Mix 2022. It is not always that governments are willing to face the good and bad of what the information reveals. But I have to say that Jamaica government has not only taken the leadership and the ownership of conducting the survey, but also in the previous review round to this launch, each of the sectors has proposed specific actions to redirect immediate actions toward achieving better results for children. It is well known that a simple figure doesn't make a difference itself. What is really important is that Jamaica has established a set of targets toward Vision 2030 and the Global SDG Agenda. And it is that the mixed data that will allow the country to identify the areas in which measures are needed to prevent setbacks in children's rights and to accelerate actions to guarantee that no one is left behind. The polycrisis that the world is facing today is once more showing us the fragility of children. I am using the word fragility because children are full of potential, but they cannot survive and thrive without us. We must treat their dreams, their capacities, their rights as a valued treasure that must be protected and granted because external threats disproportionately affect them. This year, we commemorate the 35th anniversary of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, to which Jamaica became a signatory in 1990. So many achievements have been reached since then in different spheres. The world, and specifically Jamaica, has improved regulatory framework. A stronger institutional arrangement have been made to define policies and allocate budgets. The Convention of the Right of the Child has also facilitated a broad spectrum of inclusive services for children and adolescents. Today's children are in a significantly better position than those who were children 35 years ago. However, we haven't reached the level of commitment we assumed at that time. In addition, the context has changed significantly. Now is the time to take stock and reinvigorate our leadership to keep the promise to the children. The Mix 2022 findings show significant advances in the country. It is commendable that 99% of Jamaica children are completing primary school and 95% of adolescents aged 17 to 19 have completed grade 9. It is also commendable that Jamaica continues to see high levels of vaccination in the first years of our baby lives. However, there are still some areas that require urgent attention. UNICEF is concerned that almost half of the children live in households that fall in the two lowest quintiles. UNICEF calls the immediate actions to address the plight of children in poor households through increasing access to social benefits. Also of concern is the level at which children are performing in reading and numeracy. The data reveal that among students between 7 and 14 years old, 38% of them have not acquired foundational reading skills, while only 50% of them have acquired foundational numeracy skills. A big concern is physical punishment among children. Approximately 76% of children between 1 and 14 years old experienced violence discipline in the months just before the survey was conducted. And among 3 and 4 years old, 71% experienced violent discipline, which include physical punishment and psychological aggression. I don't want to reveal more information because it will be shared in a moment by my colleagues Jacqueline Montique-Small, who I want to take the opportunity to thank and congratulate for her rigorous work. However, I want to highlight that MIX, an international multi-purpose household survey developed by UNICEF, provide insights on more than 160 international comparable indicators related with children and women. Using the survey data, Jamaica will be able to report on 30 of 45 indicators related to children that are associated with 11 of the 17 SDGs. More importantly, we all have a gold mine in front of us to keep digging and understanding what, why, and how to accelerate results for children. Finally, I want to express my appreciation for the value of alliances that made MIX 2022 survey possible. PIOJ has led the process, understanding the importance of generating evidence and promoting coherent international cooperation toward ensuring sustainable development in Jamaica's children. Statin has adhered to its mission by getting involved in the production of relevant, timely, and accurate statistical information consistent with international standards. IDB has provided financial and technical support to conduct such a cutting-edge survey with the final aims to reduce poverty and improving children's rights in Jamaica. Finally, the rigorous work of each member of the MIX Steering and Technical Committee, which includes members from various government ministries, agencies, and departments, the University of West Indies, and not-governmental organizations, has been critical to the success of MIX 2022. Not to mention Balcontics Limited, the company that undertook the mixed data collection activities, and the household members whose collaboration made all this effort possible. Thank you all. Last but not least, I want to thank my team at UNICEF, of which I am very, very proud of it. Thank you, colleagues. As I close, let me paraphrase a very well-known song. I hope that every little child rises in the morning, smiles with the rising sun, and doesn't worry about anything because we are here to guarantee their rights. Thank you.
Can you tell that she's passionate about the work that she does? Yes. I should tell you that Mrs. Saza is a dedicated, has given over 16 years of dedicated service to UNICEF, and she's a seasoned expert in social psychology and public policy, focusing on children's rights. So she would not let us miss the importance of the work that has been done. Thank you so much, Mrs. Saza. Now, the Inter-American Development Bank in Jamaica has played a crucial role in supporting the execution of the MIX survey. We're honored to have Mr. Anton Edmonds, the General Manager of the Country Department Caribbean Group and Country Representative in Jamaica, here to share his remarks. Mr. Edmonds, with his extensive background as a diplomat and political scientist, has held leadership positions across regional governments, the development sector, and the private sector, bringing a wealth of experience and insight. Hailing from Barbados and St. Lucia, he reflects a deep connection to the Caribbean region. Let's welcome Mr. Anton Edmonds.
Thank you, Mrs. Swaby. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Happy to be here. Good to see Dr. Henry, good partner of the IDB in a variety of other initiatives. So he's looking over our shoulder, I guess. Honorable Minister Fable Williams, Minister of Education and Youth, Ms. Olga Izazi, Representative UNICEF Jamaica, I mentioned you already, Dr. Henry, Mr. Henry Zulu, UN Resident Coordinator, Dr. Nadine Williams, Director of Health Services, Planning and Integration, Ministry of Health and Wellness, and I know there are other people who I missed jotting down quickly when they were mentioned, so my apologies. But good morning to all of you, colleagues, members of the media, other partners. It is a pleasure to be here with you today as we hear the findings of the 2022 Jamaica Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey MIX, which gives insight on the lives of women, children, and households across Jamaica. Ladies and gentlemen, Jamaica has a vision and a strategy for development, and we at the IDB are a committed partner. But to achieve this vision, we importantly need data. Data such as what is being provided by the mix. This information illuminates current situations and will guide us all in addressing them. By us all, yes, I mean the government of Jamaica, but civil society, the private sector stakeholders, and entities like ours, the IDB, the World Bank, and others, all of the development partners who are committed to Jamaica's development. Importantly, it provides statistics that capture the experiences of the Jamaican populace in critically important areas. How are our children performing in school? Will they have the fundamentals to enter the Jamaican and global workforce? Do they have access to proper nutrition? And significantly, how are incidences of violence in the lives of people impacting their future? This is not a Jamaica issue alone. This is a Caribbean issue. So I put on my general manager's hat here. This is not this country alone. This is a wider regional issue that we have to address. For us at the IDB, it helps inform our recent One Caribbean framework, where we focus very much in a couple of key areas, including food security and impediments to access to nutritious meals, be it the need for us to utilize climate-smart technologies in agriculture or to address market access issues, and the need not to just look at citizen security in a vacuum, and instead seek to support solutions in education and skills development at the earliest of ages. For the government, this type of analysis helps determine the inputs needed to create the workforce of the future, to position Jamaica as, amongst other things, a logistics hub. Fundamentally, what we learn today and how we address issues of concern will determine the future of this great country, determine inputs into education and initiatives to address hunger and violence. Research shows that all of the elements measured in this survey have long-term impacts. What we see in our societies today, once again, not only in Jamaica, but in our wider Caribbean, is unfortunately so very tied to the circumstances of one's upbringing, access to food, water, and the enabling environment. Jamaica must be commended for undertaking this exercise. I actually asked the question as to whether the other countries of the region have stepped up into this space, and they have not. So you need to be commended for being a leader in this space. So measuring these activities in these areas, Jamaica can track its progress towards achieving SDG goals as well as 2030 goals. I must reiterate how important the results of this survey are for international partners such as the IDB, as it would help us better support the country's efforts, not based on what we think is right, but what the data shows and what the country wants. That is important for us as development partners, to be responsive to the needs of the country, not necessarily what we think is right from Washington. In conclusion, the results from the 2022 mix will be a powerful tool for Jamaica's continued development journey, and this process has been a testament to Jamaica's commitment to data-driven decision-making. The IDB is pleased to be a part of these efforts, and kudos to our partners, the Planning Institute of Jamaica, the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, and UNICEF. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edmonds. Now, if we think that our previous speakers have been giving us any little insight about the report, they've just been giving us some snacks, just bite-sized snacks. We're about to have the full meal, all right? We've reached the pivotal moment of today's event, the presentation of the multiple indicator cluster survey findings. As the presentation unfolds, you might have questions or thoughts to share. And we're keeping an eye on our online platform, so feel free to type your contributions there. We'll address your questions right after the presentation. And for those of you who are joining us in person today, we have arranged a Q&A segment. Now, please scan the QR code displayed on your screen to access the Slido platform, as your input in the polls during the main presentation will be invaluable. So please, let's get ready. Good. Now, the insights from the Mix survey will be presented by our national Mix consultant, Jacqueline Montague-Small. Please direct your attention to the screen for a video presentation that sets the stage for our discussion. Follow Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Montague Small will guide us through the report in detail.
The Global Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey Program was developed by UNICEF as an international multipurpose household survey program to support countries in collecting internationally comparable data on a wide range of indicators on the situation of children and women. Mix 2022 provides invaluable insights on more than 160 indicators related to children and women. Some of the findings are cause for concern for the agencies monitoring Jamaica's achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. The level at which students aged 7 to 14 are performing in numeracy and reading is worrying. The data revealed that 38% of them have not acquired foundational reading skills, while only 50% of them have acquired foundational numeracy skills. In addition to education and health, the Mix report provides data on social protection, nutrition, child protection, adolescent empowerment, and water, sanitation, and hygiene, among other indicators. 4 out of every 5 persons living in the richest households have access to an improved source of drinking water, which is available when needed, compared to just over 1/2 of the population living in the poorest households. There are, however, significant advances. Education data from the 2022 mix shows that 94% of the children aged 2 to 4 are developmentally on track. 99% of Jamaica's children are completing primary school, and 95% of adolescents aged 17 to 19 have completed grade 9. With respect to health, Jamaica continues to see high levels of vaccination in the first year of life. Based on the observation of vaccination records and Mother's Report, all children between 12 and 23 months have been vaccinated against tuberculosis, and approximately 89% of children between 12 and 23 months have received the basic antigens in line with Jamaica's immunization schedule.
Protocol having been observed. I always wanted to say that. Good morning, everyone. Well, I had prepared a nice introduction to the mix for you, but I think by now everyone is really familiar with what the mix is about. So in the interest of time, I'm going to get straight into the survey. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Jamaica Mix sample and survey design. Well, I'll spare you the details of the pain of the 6 months of preparation to get the tools, the technology, and the people ready for the road. Suffice it to say that in the end, after about 4 intense weeks of training, 15 survey teams were deployed simultaneously across Jamaica. And during April to August of 2022, they conducted face-to-face interviews. The teams visited approximately 8,000 households, identifying the characteristics of the dwelling units, as well as certain demographic, social, and economic characteristics of the household members. If there were any females aged 15 to 49 years, an interview was conducted with each of them. If there were any children under the age of 5 years living in the household, an interview was conducted for each of them with their mother or primary caretaker. If there were children aged 5 to 17 years living in the household, one of these children was randomly selected and an interview was conducted with his or her mother. And if this selected child was aged 7 to 14 years, the mother's consent and the child's assent were obtained for the administration of a reading and numeracy skills assessment tool to the child.
In terms of data quality assurance, the mix uses 95% confidence intervals, and at the back of the survey findings report, there are detailed tables showing the estimates of sampling errors for selected indicators. The mix findings will be presented, well, for the most part, from an SDG perspective, and where possible, we'll have a quick look at how the country has progressed over the previous two mixed surveys. Now, for context, let's examine a few geographic and demographic characteristics of the Jamaican population. Approximately 1/2 of households are located in the urban areas. As per the national end-of-year population estimates for 2019, Jamaica's population includes approximately 700,000 children, of which about 170,000 are under the age of 5 years. Additionally, about 750,000 persons in the population are women aged 15 to 49 years. Let's also examine some general data about our children's living conditions. The orange bars on the left represent children aged 5 to 17 years, while the green bars represent children aged 0 to 4 years. Starting at the bottom of the chart, you're seeing that just over 1 in 10 children in each age group have health insurance, and this is an issue of equity. About 1/4 of children live in the poorest households, and about 1/3 live in households falling into the 2 richest quintiles. A larger percentage of the younger children have mothers who have at least some upper secondary education, which could indicate that mothers may be becoming more educated. For clarity, lower secondary includes grades 7 to 9, upper secondary includes grades 10 and 11, and the category post-secondary plus includes education from 6th form and up. And the mix also found that 15% of children do not live with either biological parent, and about 1/2 of them live only with their mother. So let's get straight to the SDG data. Under SDG 1, where a commitment has been made to end poverty in all its forms by 2030, the mix found that nationally, 7 out of every 10 households had received some type of social transfer or benefits in the last 3 months leading up to the survey. These include benefits such as PATH, NHF, school tuition support, social pension for the elderly, and so on. Still on the SDG 1, Jamaica is aiming to ensure that by 2030, all children will be receiving some sort of social transfer or benefit. According to the mixed findings, in 2022, approximately 9 out of every 10 children are living in households that have received a social benefit. Now focusing only on households falling within the 2 lowest wealth quintiles, that is, the poorest households in the country. Just over 1/2 of them received any type of social benefit. All right, let me say this. You'll be seeing a number of these charts over the course of the presentation, so I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. This shows the amount of disparities between certain groups on a characteristic. So what you
may want to focus on is the distance between the top circle and the bottom circle. The greater the distance, the greater the amount of disparities, okay? So, for example, as I said before, 56% of households received a social benefit in the 3 months before the survey. And that is that little dash there in the middle. However, you can see that among the poorest households, which were headed by females, 7 out of every 10 received some type of benefit, compared to about 4 out of every 10 of the poorest households, which were headed by a male. So you can see that in terms of receiving a social benefit, poor households that are headed by males are at a disadvantage. Now, moving on to SDG 2, which is a commitment to, among other related issues, end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition. The 2022 mix speaks to Target 2.1 in general, with current data now available on breastfeeding and infant and young child feeding, and in addition, a new locally produced baseline data are now available about the prevalence of food insecurity. These data that I'm about to share are based on a global tool called the Food Insecurity Experience Scale, or FIES, and this was developed by the Food and Agriculture Organization as a measure of people's access to food. The tool considers uncertainty or anxiety about access to food, as well as the quality and the quantity of the available food. So here are the findings from the Jamaica Mix Plus Food Insecurity Experience Scale. Nationally, almost 40% of the population experienced moderate or severe food insecurity in the 4 weeks before the survey. The education of the household head is an important factor in the food insecurity experience, and the proportion of the population living in the poorest households who experienced food insecurity is almost 7 times that of the population living in the richest households. Let's now talk about exclusive breastfeeding. According to the World Health Organization, for optimum nutrition, babies under the age of 6 months should receive only breast milk, no other liquids or solids, not even water. As you can see, Jamaica moved from a situation in 2005 where less than 1 in every 5 babies were being exclusively breastfed to a 2022 position of 1 in every 3 babies. Just to note, the national target is that by 2030, at least 7 out of every 10 babies should be exclusively breastfed. And there are some disparities in breastfeeding, mainly across the area of residence and the wealth quintiles, with babies living in the urban areas and those living in the richest households at a disadvantage. The WHO also recommends that once children reach 6 months of age, they should begin eating from the pot, right? As a supplement to the breast milk. So we will now look at food intake for children aged 6 to 23 months. So we're going to talk about minimum meal frequency, but what is minimum meal frequency? Among children who are still being breastfed, if they're 6 to 8 months old, they should be getting complementary foods at least 2 times daily. and at least 3 times daily for children aged 8 to 23 months. If the child is not being breastfed, then he or she should eat at least 4 times daily, including milk feeds. Now, the mix found that 3 out of every 5 children receive at least the minimum recommended number of meals, and this is coming from just 15% in 2005. In addition to the number of meals the children have per day, the mix also collected data about what they eat. Again, according to the WHO, children aged 6 to 23 months should be having foods from at least 5 of the 8 food groups, and 8 food groups because for babies, breast milk is considered a food group. In order for a child to be considered as having a minimum acceptable diet, they should be eating at least the minimum recommended number of meals per day, plus eating from at least 5 of the food groups. In addition, if a child is not being breastfed, they should also receive at least 2 milk feeds per day. So, the mix found that about 1 in every 3 infants are getting a minimum acceptable diet. 1 in every 4 infants in the poorest households are getting the minimum acceptable diet compared to 1 in every 2 infants in the richest households. Okay, you get a break from me. All right, so please take out your phone and you get to tell us what you think or what you know Jamaica's legal drinking age is. Oh. This is the same code that you would have scanned earlier. So, oh, the poll isn't coming up. No. Well, I'm so sorry. It appears we're having a technical difficulty. So in the interest of time, we'll move on. But what is the legal drinking age? Awesome. So, when did we get here? Just a moment. Slides seem to have run ahead of me. All right. Oh, no. Ah, I'm sorry. What's happening? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Oh, stop moving. Okay. All right, and we are back. Thank you so much. So, now moving on to SDG 3. Target 3.5 aims to strengthen the prevention and the treatment of harmful use of alcohol, among other things. The survey found that 12% of 15 to 19-year-old young women started having alcohol before they were 15 years old. And among 15 to 17-year-old girls, 13% started drinking before they were 15. Moving on now to look at the indicators that deal with childhood vaccination coverage. The mix collected immunization data for 1-year-old and 2-year-old children. The data was recorded directly from the child health passport, and in cases where the passport was not available, from the mother's recollection. So these are the data for the 1-year-old children. According to Jamaica's immunization schedule, by the time the children are 1 year old, they should have already received, at the very least, the BCG vaccine against tuberculosis, 3 vaccines against polio, and 3 DPT vaccines, that's diphtheria, whooping cough, and tetanus. These form what the WHO calls the basic antigens. So as you can see, that's the last slide, about 90% of 1-year-olds have received the basic vaccines. Now, here are the vaccination data for 2-year-old children. By the time the children get to 2 years old, they should have received at least the first measles vaccine, that's the MMR, in addition to the BCG, 3 polios, and 3 DPT vaccines, to be considered as having received the basic vaccines. And here we're seeing, that's the second to last bar, we're seeing that 4 out of every 5 3-year-olds have received the basic vaccines. And now, to be considered fully vaccinated, in addition to what I just mentioned, the children should have received a booster polio, a booster DPT, and a second measles vaccine. And overall, we're seeing that just about a half of 2-year-old children are fully vaccinated. Now, Jamaica has set a target that at least 90% of children should be fully vaccinated. And you can see that there has been a fall off over the years for various reasons. Let us now move to SDG target 4.1 to ensure that by 2030, all girls and boys complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education. The quality here is reflected in indicator 4.11, which focuses on the proportion of children achieving at least a minimum proficiency level in reading and mathematics. So, in response to the need to monitor this indicator, the Global Mix team worked with education experts across the world to develop a foundational learning skills assessment tool that would provide reliable data to measure progress in this area. The tool has 2 parts: a reading assessment, which consists of a grade 2 level reading and comprehension activity, as well as a numeracy assessment based on universal math skills children are expected to have at grade 2. These data now serves as baseline for Jamaica, as it is the first time that the country has implemented this particular type of assessment in a nationally representative household survey. So children aged 7 to 14 years were asked to read this story, every word of which can be found in the Grade 2 Integrated Language Arts Workbook. Children were considered to have successfully completed this task if they read at least 90% of the words correctly. They were then asked 3 literal and 2 inferential comprehension questions, and they were allowed to look at the story while they were answering the questions. If the child successfully completed all of these activities, they were deemed to have demonstrated foundational learning skills. So here are the results from the reading assessment. The green bars represent children who are currently in grades 2 or 3, And the gold bars represent children who are 7 to 8 years old, regardless of school attendance or grade. As you can see, the data is not very different across the two groups. The mix found that in 2022, looking at the top of the chart, about a half of these children were able to correctly read at least 90% of the words in the story. About 2 out of every 5 of these children were able to correctly answer all the questions. Putting all of that together, the mix found that 2 out of every 5 children aged 7 to 8 years or attending grades 2 to 3 have acquired foundational reading skills. And this chart shows the percentage of children aged 7 to 14 years who have acquired foundational reading skills by age. Overall, 3 out of every 5 children aged 7 to 14 years have acquired foundational reading skills. As mentioned before, 2 out of every 5 children aged 7 to 8 have the basic reading skills. By the end of primary school, around age 11, about 1 in every 4 children still do not have foundational reading skills. And there's not much improvement in this area between grades 6 and grade 9. And here you can see how the 7 to 14-year-old children are doing in reading across different characteristics. About 2 out of every 5 children with functional difficulty have demonstrated foundational reading skills, compared to 3 out of every 5 children who have no functional difficulty. Boys, children living in rural households and those living in the poorest households require targeted interventions in ensuring they're able to read and comprehend. Let's now move on to the numeracy assessment. The children were asked to complete 4 math tasks. First, they were asked to read some numbers. Then they were asked to identify which of 2 numbers is bigger. For the third task, they were given paper and pencil and asked to do some simple additions. And the fourth task was pattern recognition and completion. That is, they were given a series of numbers with 1 missing and asked what number is missing. If the child successfully completed all 4 tasks, they were deemed to have demonstrated foundational numeracy skills. The green bars represent children who are currently in grades 2 or 3, and the gold bars represent children who are 7 to 8 years old, regardless of school attendance. And the mix found that about 3 out of every 5 children were able to correctly read all the numbers they were shown. During the numeracy assessment, the children performed best on the number discrimination task when we asked them which one is bigger, with 3 out of every 4 being successful. Approximately 3 out of every 5 completed the addition task, and 2 out of every 5 successfully completed the pattern recognition task. Now, putting all of that together, the mix found that about 3 out of every 10 children aged 7 to 8 years or attending grades 2 or 3 have acquired the foundational numeracy skills. And this chart shows the 7 to 14-year-olds. About a half of 7 to 14-year-olds have acquired foundational numeracy skills. At age 11, 70% have these skills, and about 1/5 of 14-year-olds still have not acquired foundational learning skills. And here, looking at certain characteristics, again, we are seeing that children with functional difficulty and those children living in the rural areas and the poorest households are at a disadvantage. I hope this one works. See if you can put in your responses, please. Use the same, is it working? No? Oh, it's working. Awesome. So what percentage of children aged 7 to 14 years have foundational numeracy skills? Anybody? Just about 30%, right? All right, moving on. Thank you for your attempt to participate. I'm sorry? Oh, it works. Awesome. Okay. Oh, all right. All right, let's move on. Still on the target 4.1 and focusing now on school completion rates for primary and secondary education. The 2030 national target for primary school completion is 100%, and Jamaica is in a position to say it has achieved universal primary education. The 2030 national target for lower secondary completion is also 100%, and the country is at 95%. And for upper secondary school completion, with a national target of 95%, Jamaica is currently at 86%. In terms of upper secondary school completion rates, the data show that 3/4 of youths from the poorest households completed upper secondary school compared to almost all of the youths from the richest households. Now let's examine the net attendance rates for primary and secondary school aged children. The national target for net attendance across primary and secondary education is 95%. According to the mix, Jamaica already met that target for primary school-aged children from way back. And currently, 96% of children aged 6 to 11 years are attending either primary or secondary school. About 9 out of every 10 children aged 12 to 14 years are attending lower secondary school or higher, while about 8 out of every 10 children aged 15 to 16 years are attending upper secondary school or higher. And just for comparison, in 2011, the mix found that about 9 out of every 10 secondary school-aged children, now these are the children 12 to 16 years, were attending secondary school or higher. So by the time the children become 15 and 16 years old, factors such as their sex, their mother's education level, and their household's economic circumstances begin to weigh on whether or not they attend school. Finally, under target 4.1, not finally for the presentation, sorry, the mix collected data on the percentage of children that are out of school. At the top of the chart, the mix found that about 7% of 5-year-old boys and girls are not attending school. Dimension 3, the one in the middle there, is showing that 5% of 12 to 14-year-old boys are not attending any school, and on the bottom dimension, among children aged 15 to 16 years, 13% of boys and 7% of girls are not attending any school. The out-of-school situation, especially at the early childhood and the upper secondary school levels, requires a gendered approach, as it is clear that boys are disproportionately affected. Moving on now to SDG Target 4.2, where the aim is to ensure that all children have access to quality early childhood development, care, and primary education so that they are ready for primary school. Indicator 4.2.1 focuses on 2 to 4-year-olds who are developmentally untracked. Now, again, in response to the 2030 Development Agenda, the Global Mix Program developed a new tool, the Early Childhood Development Index 2030, or ECDI 2030, to measure children's progress in the domains of health, learning, and psychosocial well-being. The ECDI 2030 found that about 94% of 2 to 4-year-old children are developmentally on track, and this is pretty much the case across most of the characteristics that we examined. However, targeted interventions are required to address the situation of children with functional difficulties and to guarantee equitable opportunities for all children. Still on the Target 4.2, the mix collected data on the participation rate in organized learning at age 5, as well as attendance of 3 to 4-year-olds at the early childhood level. The national target for attendance at early childhood education is 95%. The mix found that 7 out of every 10 children aged 3 to 4 years are attending early childhood education, and about 9 out of every 10 5-year-old children are attending either early childhood education or primary school. Now, among children 3 to 4 years, the mother's education level and whether the child has a functional difficulty weighs heavily on attendance in an early childhood education program. Under SDG 5, Jamaica has committed to totally eliminating child, early, and forced marriage. For the purpose of the Mix 2022, married or in a union includes legally married, common law unions, as well as visiting partner unions. About a quarter of women aged 20 to 24 years were married or in a union before age 18. About 6% of them were in the union before age 15 years, and about 1/5 of adolescent girls are currently in a union. Jamaica has set a target to ensure the entire population has access to clean water and sanitation by 2030. At 99%, we can say that Jamaica has achieved the target of ensuring access to improved water sources. And improved water sources include piped water, water from protected wells and springs, rainwater, and packaged water or water that is delivered. Just over 90% of the population has access to an improved toilet facility which is not shared. Toilets which flush to either a sewer system, a septic tank or pit, or if the respondent didn't know where the toilet flushes to, are considered as improved toilets. Additionally, if the household is using a pit toilet which is on a slab, or if they're using a composting toilet, those are also considered as improved toilets. In terms of the population that has a hand washing facility with soap and water available, the mix is showing 80%. Well, there was a challenge in collecting this data, as it is based on observation. So the interviewer had to request permission to see the place where the household members wash their hands, and then the interviewer had to observe whether there was water and soap available. But you know us, we're not letting people in to our homes. And so, if the interviewer was not able to observe the place for hand washing, those households are not included in this 80%, which suggests that the indicator is most likely higher. Okay, you get another break from me. Please see if you can guess what percentage of Jamaica's poorest households have access to electricity. Is it approximately all of them? Please record your answers. Nobody knows? Oh, all right, guess, please. Oh. Are we done? Okay. I'm sure most of you are guessing correctly. We can go to the next slide. Done? Did you guess correctly? All right. So almost the entire population has access to electricity at 98%. However, there is still work to be done among the population living in the poorest households, as only about 90% of them have electricity. Similarly, while about 9 out of every 10 persons use clean fuels for cooking and lighting, only 6 out of every 10 households living in the poorest households do. So these other households are using like solid fuels and kerosene and that sort of thing. SDG target 8.7 calls for immediate and effective measures to eradicate harmful practices such as child labor, and by 2025 end child labor in all its forms. Jamaica has committed to doing so by 2030. The 2022 mix found that about 7% of Jamaican children aged 5 to 17 years are engaged in child labor or hazardous work, and this is down from 11% in 2011. As you can see, boys and children living in the rural areas or in the poorest households are especially at risk for child labor. Under SDG 16, with the advent of bedside registration, among children under 5 years, Jamaica has already achieved the target of birth registration for all children. However, I'm sorry, about 1/5 of the children are not in possession of the birth certificate, and this can have an impact on their rights. Under Target 16.2, Jamaica has committed to ending all forms of violence against children by 2030. The 2022 data shows that 84% of mothers or caregivers do not believe that physical punishment is necessary to raise a child properly. However, the mix also found that about 3/4 of Jamaican children aged 1 to 14 years experienced violent discipline in the month prior to the survey. And this is down from 87% in 2005. Finally, under SDG 16, the mix found that 3 out of every 5 women feel safe walking alone in their neighborhood after dark. In this case, we can see that women living in the richest households or in urban areas feel less safe than their counterparts. Coming to the end of it, we looked at some cross-cutting findings to share here. For the first time, the Jamaica Mix collected data about children with functional difficulty. The child functioning module is designed in line with the WHO's International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health and the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to collect information on functional difficulties that children experience across different domains, including hearing, vision, communication or comprehension, learning, mobility, and so on. It was found that overall, about 6% of children aged 2 to 17 years have a functional difficulty based on their mother's or caretaker's report. Now, for the purpose of the mix, this measurement of child functioning rests on the child's ability to function. For example, 7% of children wears glasses. However, only 2% of them have difficulty seeing while wearing the glasses. So for this measurement, only those 2% of children are considered to have a functioning difficulty. On a scale of 1 to 10, women aged 15 to 24 years registered a life satisfaction score of 6.7%. About 8 out of every 10 young women indicated that they are very happy or somewhat happy, and 7 out of every 10 feel that their lives improved over the last year and expect life will improve in the coming year. All right, this brings us to the end of my presentation. So what are the next steps? Bear in mind that these data that I just shared are just the tip of what is available in the 2022 mix. You have the full report, and you are invited to explore the findings, identify areas of key concern for your sector, your agency, and incorporate the evidence into decisions about what actions are needed for the best interest of children. And for the academics and other serious researchers, the data sets will be available upon request through the Mix website. Thank you so much for your attention.
As I said, a full meal, right? We've gotten a lot to think about. Wow. Thank you so much, Mrs. Montague Small. Okay, so we're now going to be opening the floor for a Q&A session, welcoming both in-person and online participants to contribute to the discussion. For those who are joining us, for those of us here, we have 2 standing microphones, one on the left and one on the right, and you can go to the microphones to ask your questions. Please introduce yourself by stating your name and your organization ahead of making your contribution. Now, this process is important. It will not only enrich our discussion, but also provide valuable insights to the Ministries of Education and Youth and Health and Wellness, because we will be hearing responses from the minister and the ministers, one minister, Minister Favour Williams, and Minister Tufton's representative. Your engagement is vital to the development of future initiatives. So feel free to ask your questions now, and let's dive into a productive exchange. So don't all run to the microphones at once. But you know what? Our friends online have been sharing their questions with us. And for those of us who want to access the report, we have the QR code on screen there. And the ushers can hand out to you as well. So we're seeing some of the questions shared from online. Or Interpreter Tony, you said you had a question? Okay, so we have a question from Antoinette as well. And I think, Tony, we want you to use the microphone, yes, so we can capture that well.
Yes, I can talk. I wanted to know, you said you collected information on disabilities. I wanted to know if you separated them. So if you have information on the deaf community, on the blind community, etc., etc.
All right, thank you for that. Mrs. Montague-Small, so I'll allow you to respond to that. Any other question? Well, please come and respond to that question, Mrs. Montague-Small, because while you're doing that, my other friends and colleagues in the audience, you can make your way to the microphones for your contributions.
Thank you, Tony. Yes, we collected data on child functioning across several domains, including hearing, seeing, mobility, emotions, and so on. And these data can be broken out in the bigger report. The tables are there showing what the situation is for each of these domains.
Thank you. I think you might need to stay close because I believe that there are some other questions that will require your response. So we have someone at the microphone. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Christine Hendricks, Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. So I was curious to find out in that 100%, achieving 100% primary education, I wanted to know the percentage of persons with disabilities in that. I was very curious to know if they're included in that 100%.
The data for children with functioning difficulties, it is broken out in the large report, so you can see what percentage of children with functional difficulties have completed primary education, or the different levels.
On the point of functional difficulties, there was a question from online. They wanted to know how the report really defined functional difficulties for children.
Okay, so mothers were asked, for example, if John wears glasses, does John have difficulty seeing while wearing his glasses? Would you say no difficulty, some difficulty, a lot of difficulty, or he can't see it at all? He can't see at all. If John doesn't wear glasses, then the answer is very straightforward. Does John have difficulty seeing? For the mixed methodology, children who couldn't perform in the domain at all, and those who had a lot of difficulty were classified as having a functional difficulty.
Thank you very much. Person on my left, please go ahead, sir.
Hi, good day. I'm Mackie Blake from the Embassy of Mexico in Jamaica. I have a few questions. One is whether or not, given the pandemic, the impact that would have had on the time, especially in terms of numeracy and literacy, whether or not that was taken into account. So that's one question. And then another question that is related in terms of homeschooling. Was that captured in the report? Because I know that it was geared mostly towards persons who are in educational institutions, public or otherwise. And then lastly, this is really minor, but in terms of alcohol use for children, in my experience as a child, I tasted alcohol, but I never habitually drank alcohol, like tasting it out of curiosity. That would have been filtered out of the considerations or the responses, right?
Thank you for those questions.
Thank you. So in terms of the impact of COVID on foundational learning skills, the mix, the nature of the survey is such that this report that has been released does not explore the whys of the findings. Further research, taking the data and building models, is required to determine the whys in the mixed data. So again, here is a call for our researchers to request the data and do the work. Thank you. In terms of children who are homeschooled, one of the big advantage we think of the foundational learning skills module in the mix is that it assesses all children regardless of their school attendance. So whether or not they're attending school, regardless of the age they're in, as long as they fell within the age group 7 to 14 years, they were included in the assessment. And in terms of alcohol use, yes. We were very clear in indicating when we asked, at what age did you have your first drink of alcohol? We defined for the respondent what we meant by a drink of alcohol, which was a glass of wine, a can of beer, a shot of whatever. So we ensured that they knew we were talking about an entire drink, not just sips. Okay?
Thank you very much. Professor Henry Lee.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Excellent report. I want to give commendations to the team. Very rich data, and yes, representing UWI, we will be asking for the data sets so that our students and researchers can use the data. I noticed that we have high attendance rates, but we have concerns with literacy and numeracy. So I wanted to ask the minister if there were specific initiatives in place to improve those rates. And apart from that, did you do anything on mental health? I know, back to the question on COVID, we have seen a deterioration in the mental health of our students. So I just wondered if there was any question that captured the mental health. But excellent presentation, excellent report, and thank you so much for the rich data.
Awesome. So, Mrs. Montague-Small, the question for you is about mental health, and Minister Williams, I know you had that question about initiatives to address the gaps, because we have the attendance, but we have the gaps in the performance. Thank you.
Thank you. For the child functioning module, we did ask some questions about whether the child had felt anxious or nervous or that sort of thing. And of course, this is based on the mother's report. So the data is there, but to a very limited extent. However, I have to make a plug for the next mix. The mix program has developed a quite robust mental health module, and the mix 7 has been rolled out. So when Jamaica implements the next mix, then the country has the opportunity to include that module in the survey.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much to our national mix consultant, Jacqueline Montague Small. Oh, yeah. This will be our final question from the audience. Go ahead, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Quick question. With regards to indicator 4.1.1, the education, quality education for all, I didn't hear much about children in conflict with the law, so children who would be within the remand centers, detention centers, and how that would fare in terms of the 100% attendance, especially at the primary level, the secondary level, most likely. I'd like to know if they were included in that research and how that fared for them.
Yes, please.
A very good question. Thank you. The survey, it was conducted only at households, and only the persons who were members of the household at the time would have been included. So for the most part, no, those persons would not have been accounted for in the mix.
Thank you very much. So there are some rich questions that have been given, including online where persons wanted responses to many of the why questions. So I heard you, Mrs. Montague Small, when you said, you're calling on the researchers, the developmental practitioners to extend the use of this data now, because some of those why questions will need to be answered for the benefit of the children and women of Jamaica. Now, at the end of the day, we know that our ministries exist to answer these questions for us in many regards and provide solutions to improve the lives, the well-being of children and women in Jamaica. So it is important then for us to have some responses. So this report shed lights on pivotal areas with the potential to significantly advance the health and welfare of women and children. Dr. Nadine Williams, Director of Health Services Planning and Integration, is poised to elaborate on how the Ministry of Health and Wellness plans to harness these insights for the betterment of these key population segments. Her wealth of experience as a consultant physician and gastroenterologist, complemented by her distinguished academic involvement as an associate lecturer at the University of the West Indies, equips her with a profound understanding of the challenges and opportunities presented. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nadine Williams to the podium to share her valuable perspective.
That was very kind of her. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Honorable Minister, distinguished guests, Mr. Henry, Mr. Edmonds, and Ms. Izaza. Good day. Distinguished guests, all participants, members of the media, good morning. I really want to congratulate the mixed team for an awesome piece of work. This is a huge piece of work, and I am very, very happy on behalf of the Ministry of Health that we have been invited to participate today and provide a response. So you would have heard that the multiple indicator cluster survey provides key data on women and children and has been fielded in 118 countries globally. The Ministry of Health and Wellness recognizes the importance of the mix to monitor and evaluate health programs and policies. It's a major source of information to track progress towards the achievement of the SDGs by providing 30 indicators, data on 30 indicators, and the survey will monitor progress towards achieving relevant goals on the Vision 2030 Jamaica, as well as to inform the National Sustainable Development Plan. There have been 4 iterations of mix, as you hear, and the 22 report will be useful with respect to what we're doing to make national comparisons and describe trends to identify populations at risk and inform policy decisions, to monitor progress in achieving national, regional, and international regions. Public health seeks to address risk factors that may affect the burden of disease and which may have a direct or indirect effect on health. These may include lifestyle or behavior, socioeconomic factors, or the physical environment. The mix provides important information on these factors such as alcohol, tobacco, and you'd have heard them all. Now, with respect to the points to which we will respond, infant and young child feeding, you'd have heard a lot about that. In 2012, the World Health Assembly proposed a comprehensive implementation plan on maternal, infant, and young child nutrition to address the double burden of malnutrition. 6 global targets were to be attained, including the increasing the rate of exclusive breastfeeding in the first 6 months of up to at least 50% by 2025. You'd have heard the local target of 70% by 2030, and yet the target of up to 50% by 2025 is one of the global targets. While breastfeeding is not directly addressed under the SDGs, SDG 2 addresses hunger, while the Goal 3 addresses good health and well-being. You're all familiar. It is acknowledged that breast milk is a vital source of nutrition, while breastfeeding leads to improved health outcome of mother and children. So the Ministry of Health acknowledges that based on the findings from the mix, progress has been made to increase breastfeeding rates in Jamaica. In 2022, Jamaica had an exclusive breastfeeding rate of infants less than 6 months of age of 33%. You would have heard this, that it was actually a 9 percentage points over 2011, which was 23.8%. You'd have seen 24% on the chart. However, this data suggests that Jamaica is actually not on track to meet the global target of 2025 of an exclusive breastfeeding rate of higher than 50%. However, it is hoped that we will in fact be able to catch up beyond that, beyond the 2025 and up to 2030. And we would have put in some strategies already, and I will name them in a little while. According to Mix, the country has also made progress in the area of complementary feeding, and you'd have heard what complementary feeding is. There was improvement in the proportion of children aged 6 to 8 months to whom solid and semi-solid or soft foods were introduced, from 54.6% in 2011 to 86.3% in 2022. I think this is a significant increase and improvement. There was also an improvement in the proportion of children ages 6 to 23 months who received the minimum amount of meals per day based on their age. This moved from 42% in 2011 to 61.7% in 2022. The survey also measured minimum dietary diversity, which you would have heard the definition, the percentage of children between 6 and 23 months who received foods from 5 or more food groups. As only 51% of children met this requirement, this suggests that our Jamaican mothers must be encouraged to feed from a variety of foods to their infants and children, including breast milk, and you'd have heard that that is in fact one of the food groups, grains, beans, peas, seeds, dairy products, flesh foods, eggs, and fruits and vegetables, and therefore that becomes a part of our campaign. Jamaica has worked towards promoting, supporting, and protecting appropriate infant and young child feeding, including the development and supplementation and the implementation of our national infant and young child policy, which was developed in 2018, with a supporting plan of action for the implementation of the policy. So our national infant and young child feeding policy is very fundamental as to how we move forward to make some dents in the gaps that exist. Strategies implemented include implementation of the baby-friendly hospital initiative in both public and private institutions providing maternity services. The hospitals all try very, very hard to be, to be designated as baby-friendly hospitals. Development and implementation of a communication strategy for infant and young child feeding. Establishment of community infant and young child feeding support groups in parishes across health regions. Training of healthcare workers. Workplace support for breastfeeding. Establishment of parish infant and young child feeding community committees. Initiation of a media campaign on breastfeeding and complementary feeding. So those would have been activities which would have been initiated already. In order to improve infant and young child feeding practices over the next 2 years, plans are in place to promulgate legislation regulations for a national code of marketing for breast milk substitutes. Develop a workplace policy that addresses breastfeeding support. So not only the guidelines that have been instituted, but also to implement the policy with respect to workplace support for breastfeeding, to strengthen the nutrition surveillance system, and to establish and strengthen community infant and young child feeding support groups. So these are some of the strategies that would be implemented within the next 2 years, and in fact would have been implemented thus far. And as I said, it is to note that we would have actually made some gains in the previous years. With respect to immunization coverage, and a lot would have been said about that, our national target for all childhood vaccines, antigens, is actually 95% as a coverage rate. Vaccination begins at birth in hospitals, with the BCG vaccine that protects against tuberculosis as approximately 99% of all births island-wide. This occurs in hospitals, and because it occurs in hospitals, there is generally a relatively high the baby is born, they get the BCG right away, or soon thereafter, if not. The hepatitis B birth dose vaccine was also introduced after the mixed survey. So in January 2023, the hepatitis B birth dose vaccine was actually introduced. And it attained, the expectation of a high rate is also expected because it is actually administered at the time at birth, like the BCG vaccine. Now, this survey shows that there is a concern with respect to dropout at 6 months for the third dose at polio, which was said to be 88%, and the pentavalent vaccine at 80%, and at 18 months for the polio booster at 58%, and the second one at 57%. Quite a bit of data is kind of, a little bit difficult to absorb everything, but you'd have seen a lot of data. Of note, our national coverage rates with respect to our administrative data in 2021 were 89% for both antigens. It's important to know that both of those antigens are actually given at the same time in terms of the polio and the DPT. So it is. So we have 89% for first and second MMR. This was 86 and 88 and 86% respectively. Now, I did see one of the questions asking, could it be that because the vaccines were actually, the survey was actually administered in the time of COVID, could it be that this would have interrupted or interfered with the rates of vaccine administration? And our answer to that is yes, because the COVID pandemic would have significantly impacted on the capacity of our persons to coming into health centers and in the usual for the community health aides to go out for the patients who would not have had their vaccines. Nonetheless, in October 2022, we would have launched our mop-up catch-up campaign that was launched, and it is important to note that this would have actually been after the mixed survey. Subsequently, we would have noted that there was significant And I use the word significant a little bit loosely because I recognize that there are some serious biostatisticians in here. But it is important to know that we would have had an increase in our polio 3 and DPT coverage rates to 91 and 93% respectively. And I believe that that is important to take into consideration when you're asking what are we going to do, because the what are we going to do had already started since October 2022. In addition to that, we would have achieved a 100% for both antigens in 2023. And I pause to say that we would have updated the data up to yesterday, because we do know that the coverage rates is dependent on the birth cohort, the numbers in the birth cohort, and we would have actually had information from the RDG with respect to the numbers in the birth cohort. So our coverage rates is dependent on how many babies were actually born at that time. And so with the updating of that information on our EPI database, we would have had the opportunity. So that is important, because it means that, yes, you would have given us some good marks, but I believe it is a relief to know that the actual coverage rate is actually better. So I'm sure that somebody wants to give a round of applause for that. The administration of the MMR vaccine for measles, mumps, and rubella, however, that however word, continues to be a bit of a challenge. And we do know that the first dose before the survey, so while 95% of the children under 3 would have received the first dose of MMR before the survey, only 62% would have received the second dose by 18 months. So in other words, there was a bit of a fall off at that time in 18 months. And so the coverage, whereas the coverage of the MMR 1 and 2 have increased since the mixed survey to 91 and 83% in 2022 and 92 and 89% in 2023, we do believe that it is important for us to interrogate further this particular matter. So at 18 months, because then it means that there is a reason why the babies are not being vaccinated at that time, and we need to encourage the mothers to come up more during that time. So I would have commented on our updated information. Now, a third of 4 points, the diarrheal diseases. The under 5 deaths from diarrheal disease, luckily, is low. With only about a third of cases presenting for health care, though, based on the survey findings, severe presentation of diarrhea appears to be in the minority, and most cases are likely to be treated at home. ORF, or oral rehydration therapy, is a commonplace, accessible treatment modality in Jamaica, so that is good. There is, however, concern regarding the proportion of children, though less than 20%, consuming less or no liquids or food during diarrheal illness. So this speaks to how it is that the parents are treating them at home when they have diarrheal illness. They should be getting more liquids, not less. So this is concerning, and this therefore means that we would have to address this in public awareness campaigns. Lastly, with respect to the intellectual development, it is to note, we just wanted to add that there is in fact an intervention that the Ministry of Health has implemented, and this really is an offshoot of an old program, the Reach Up program. The Reach Up program is Jamaican in design. It's been around for many, many years, decades in fact, but it's an early stimulation program which is applied to children between 6 months and up to 6 years, depending on where it is applied. So it is applied at home, where parents are actually taught how to stimulate their children, or by remotely, or in the health centers. And so this tested and tried entity, this program, it is one of our interventions which we hope will actually have an impact, a long-term impact in our children's intellectual development. So in conclusion, the mix provides important information, very, very important information on maternal and child health that is key to tracking our programs and policies in the Ministry of Health and Wellness. The Ministry congratulates the initiators of the survey, and we also do say thanks to our own teams within the Ministry of Health and Wellness who have written the policies that we have spoken about and have implemented any strategies that we would have spoken about which would impact on any of the outcomes of the survey that has been done. So thank you so much for having
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. Okay, so we've heard the response from health, and we know that work is afoot. In fact, Dr. Williams made sure to point out to us that, remember, their mop-up catch-up campaign around vaccines started before we had the results of the 2022 mix. So we know the numbers should be looking a little bit better for some of the vaccines. Okay. Now, Jamaica's commitment to education is underscored by allocating over 20% of its annual budget to the Ministry of Education and Youth. The Honourable Favour Williams will offer her perspective on the mixed report and its implications for educational policy and planning. Her expertise will help delineate how we can utilise these findings to refine our educational strategies. Minister Williams, a chartered financial analyst with extensive leadership experience in investment sectors, both in Jamaica and abroad, has been a significant figure in Parliament for 2 terms and has led the Ministry of Education and Youth since 2020. Her financial acumen and legislative experience are invaluable assets in her current role. Please welcome Minister Williams to present her insights.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Let me begin by acknowledging Dr. Wayne Henry, Director General, Planning Institute of Jamaica, and the team from the PIOJ. Let me acknowledge as well Ms. Olga Isaza, Representative UNICEF Jamaica, Mr. Zulu, UN Resident Coordinator, Mr. Anton Edmonds, General Manager, Country Department, Caribbean Group, and Country Representative in Jamaica, International American Development Bank, Ms. Jacqueline Small, National Mix Consultant, I think, who presented the results quite eloquently and with clarity, yes. Let me just say, ladies and gentlemen, today I am pleased to be here. The data that was presented came to us first, so none of it was a surprise as I sat there and listened. But let me say that the data-rich reports add to other recently published studies on Jamaican students and the indicators and variables that may be having an impact on their educational outcomes. For us at the Ministry of Education and Youth, the MIC 2022 report affirms positives such as the 94% on-track score for children aged 2 to 4 years who are developmentally on track in health, learning, and psychosocial well-being. At the same time, it highlights areas that need to be addressed urgently, such as the out-of-school rate for children ages 3 to 5 and 15 to 17, with boys being disproportionately affected. And I know that there was a question as to what are the initiatives, what are we doing about addressing this attendance issue. And I want to say that there are several initiatives in place. They've been in place. They may need to be scaled up more. Prior studies had indicated to us that the major factors causing non-attendance at school has to do with not having lunch money or transportation, especially for those children who live in rural Jamaica. As you know, in Kingston, children in the KSA, children have access to the JUTC bus. Fares are extremely subsidized in the KSA, and only recently the Ministry of Finance further reduced fares for travel on the JUTC. But when we look in rural Jamaica and you look at the fares that parents have to pay to and from school, it is a real burden. So what have we done in our budgets annually? Some $300 million are budgeted for children on path, and that 300 million, even though it sounds like a big number, we have only been able to reach about 7,500 students with transportation subsidy, and it's handled at the school level. So a principal in a school would know who are the children on path, and they would arrange the bus transportation to and from school. And if you happen to go to some of our rural schools, you will see on display just this transportation, the minibuses or whatever that drops off the children at school. But like I said, I'll admit that 7,500 children, that's just a drop in the bucket. And it's an area that we would definitely love more budget support on in order to help our children. With regards to lunch, and we do provide not only lunch but breakfast, snack for children on path. And we get this data from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, because that's the ministry through which parents will go to register. Currently, we serve about 100,000 students. Our budget for lunch and breakfast snack is, for this coming financial year, which starts in April, is about 7 billion Jamaican dollars. That reaches almost 100,000 students. So they do get lunch. The students who are on the lunch program, they do get lunch every day for the 190 school days in the year. Similarly, those on for the breakfast snack as well. Over the last few years, we have ensured that our schools have a functioning school canteen. So that would help as well to provide lunches for those children who may not be on path. And we have been encouraging as well across our schools the implementation of school gardens. And we've seen where schools that have school gardens are able to supplement their lunch program. So as an example, if you go to Papine High School in Papine, they have a robust school garden, and they will tell you how many dozens of eggs they produce and how many pounds of lettuce and so on that they use in their lunch program as well, or excess is sold and they get the cash. This year in the budget, in our budget, we've allocated $25 million to support school gardens at school, and we've gone further because we realize that those gardens, once we get to the end of the school year and you don't have teachers and students on the campus, they just tend to die. And when you come back in September, you have to start all over again. So we have launched a program to encourage parents to come on board to support the gardens during the summer, and it's a program where the parents benefit as well while they're providing their labor to ensure that the gardens don't die. So those are some of the initiatives that we have in place. I should mention as well, back on transportation, if you recall, in December of 2021, we, with the help of the Jamaica Railway Corporation, launched the train service from Old Harbor and Linstead to Spanish Town, and school children ride free on the train from those locations. We are moving to better collect information on attendance by installing what's called the EMIS, the Education Management Information System. We've been working on the attendance component of it so that we're able to collect information electronically, almost real time, to help us. So you do know now that every teacher in every classroom across Jamaica collects attendance, but they collect it manually in a book. And Central Ministry does get that information, but they get it at the end of the school year. So it's difficult for us to take action with that data. So now, once we roll out the EMIS and are able to get attendance electronically, you can see how much better we will know who is attending school, who is absent, how many days are they absent for the week, and we can take action in terms of calling parents, finding out what's going on. A whole lot more will happen once we have that data in our hands. So that's what we're doing with regards to attendance, to ensure that our children are in school, because if they're not there, the teaching and learning is going to be impacted. We only have 190 school days in the year, and some of those days are taken up with cultural events and other things. So it's important that our parents really take it seriously to have their children in school, make the sacrifice for them to be there. So the report findings also highlighted the socioeconomic factors contributing to students participating in online learning during the pandemic, noting an 89% score for higher income households and a 38% score by the poorest households where there was no internet, no access to internet at home, and exclusive access to a device. Since the pandemic, we've taken significant steps to close the digital divide. During the pandemic, we had a lot of efforts as well, because you know that during the pandemic, as a country, we were able to pivot onto the online world. We had the Google Learning Management System, which we do have. All of our students in school have an email address that they were able to use to access the online space. Our teachers were trained, and I believe when we look back, we were able to come through the pandemic with the majority of our children learning, and the majority of our teachers teaching. We have sought to continue the gains from technology from the pandemic by moving to ensure that more of our students have devices during the pandemic. We spent billions of dollars to ensure our children on PATH had a device. We ensured teachers had connectivity by paying for it. The ministry paid for it. Now, out of the pandemic, we've moved to ensure that all of our teachers have access to a laptop. We started with our primary schools, and by the end of this school year, we would have completed with teachers in our high schools. Every single teacher should have access to a laptop. We've moved further to ensure that all the technology labs in all of our high schools across Jamaica were updated with state-of-the-art laptops. No longer will you walk into a lab and see the clunky, desktop thing. You'll see a sleek laptop that our students are able to manipulate. So if they don't have a device and are going to high school, then it's a certainty that they will get access to using a laptop in the labs. Additionally, we started during the pandemic to roll out broadband connectivity to all of our schools, and we have 1,010 schools across Jamaica, with two-thirds of those being primary schools and about a third being high schools. And our goal is to ensure that all of our schools have adequate broadband connectivity. It's an interministerial effort across 5 different entities, and we meet weekly to see the progress. And it literally means laying fiber optic cable to connect schools, and where we can't connect them with fiber, we do with wireless. Where we can't connect them with wireless, we do satellite. So at the end of the day, every single school should have adequate broadband connectivity. That's the only way we will reduce the digital divide. That's the only way we'll keep inequity out of the system. It's major spending in terms of billions of dollars, but it's a commitment. We have to do it, and we're not just talking that we have to do it, we're actually implementing as we go along. It's going to take us at least 2 more years to complete that because, like I said, it's literally, physically laying cables and putting up towers and so on. But at the end of the day, all schools will have adequate broadband connectivity. Moving on now to the challenges in fundamental literacy and numeracy at the early childhood level. We see where access to age-appropriate reading material. We see the importance of greater parental involvement with their children's education. And we note those. You know, we do have the National Parent Support Commission. We're looking to shore that up so they can reach more parents. As a matter of fact, our goal this year in terms of reaching parents is at least 100,000 parents. And what do we mean by reaching them? Ensuring that they attend sessions that have to do with effective parenting. And their attendance at those sessions are documented, and it's more than 1 session, anywhere from 3 to 10 sessions, so that we can bring this important information to them. We have in 225 of our schools, and the 225 schools were identified to be operating at an unsatisfactory level by the National Education Inspectorate. We have targeted those schools with 3 different literacy programs. You might have heard of the Creative Language-Based Learning Program. We have that in some of our schools. These are programs that we really need to scale up so that more of our schools have them. We have the ARROW, which is the Aura, Reading, Respond, Oral, Write, and oral means listening, whether through music, video, or so on. We've been piloting these initiatives, and we are very, very happy with the results that we're seeing because we're able to move children 2 and 3 grade levels in a short period of time. So it's a matter now of us scaling it up, and when I say scaling it up, I mean having it in more schools so that we can begin to see appreciable difference in literacy and numeracy across the schools. All right, so I want to just thank the gatherers of the data. You've organized it in a way that we can understand and we can use in our policies, and we can plan our interventions so that the next time you do this report, we'd expect to see better results in literacy and numeracy. With the recognized need to provide children with a strong foundation at the early childhood level, the 71% score for children aged 36 to 59 months who are attending early childhood education is encouraging. However, there's a clear imperative of getting more parents to understand why their children should get a good earlier start in their formal schooling. The 93% participation rate of 5-year-old children, that is 1 year before official primary school entry level, who are attending early childhood education or primary school, represents a clear improvement. As you know, the national target is 95% by the year 2030. We want to encourage all our parents as we roll out our Brain Builder centers, of which we have over 100 across Jamaica, dedicated for 0 to 3 years old, to bring their children into those facilities where there is early stimulation. It's a structured environment for those children. We need to roll out more of those Brain Builder centers for those very, very early years so that we can get our children, like I said, stimulated. But to close, the findings of significant fundamental weakness in literacy and numeracy reinforces the analysis from other studies. And as you can see, we have begun to address that with the initiatives I talked about. But I'll be the first to recognize that those initiatives need to be rolled out on a broader scale for us to see improvement. We will use the data presented to enrich our plans and make adjustments where programs are already underway. So thank you again for the data. Continue to do the good work that you do. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister Williams. Ladies and gentlemen, the official release of this report
So sorry, there was a question about children who are in remand centers, if they get teaching and learning. Simple answer, yes.
Thank you very much. The official release of this report initiates a critical journey, equipping agencies with the necessary data and insights to enhance the well-being of Jamaica's women and children. Now, personally, I'm very invested in hearing what comes next, and I love that the national consultant, Mrs. Jacqueline Montague Small, indicated some next steps. So it's like a relay, and she did a first leg for us. We have work to do. And it behoves all the ministries, departments, and agencies to run their legs of the relay very, very well. And the researchers, I know many people are writing down their points. Some people have been tweeting, because those why questions will continue to befuddle our brains until we've been able to give some answers to help also craft policy and solutions. The PIOJ, Statin, IDB, and UNICEF extend their gratitude to all agencies and individuals whose efforts were crucial to completing and launching the 2022 Mix Report. Special thanks today go to Minister Favour Williams and Dr. Nadine Williams for their insightful remarks representing the education and health sectors respectively, and they have both indicated to us that yes, there are areas to be concerned about with the data provided, but work has begun, right, to address some of the areas that do need to be addressed. Key contributions to the survey implementation include leadership by Mr. Easton Williams, see him there, as chair of the Mixed Steering Committee, along with the dedicated members of both the steering and technical committees and those involved in the document review. And we can indeed give them a round of applause. We saw her very, very accessible presentation, but we must say thank you as well for the expertise of the National Mix Consultant, Ms. Jacqueline Montague Small. And we have to commend her because we know that sometimes data can get very heavy. We're not going to use the word boring because we need the data. And I really can't use the word boring because personally I love the data. I love research. So I'm happy that she presented it, though, in a format that was very, very accessible. And I can tell you that people are already downloading and reading the reports. So commendations to you and thank you very much. The field work conducted by Balcostics Research Limited, the firm responsible for data collection. Thank you very much, Balcostics. And of course, we are grateful for the cooperation of schools in the pilot program and the households that participated in interviews, opening their homes to our team. Thank you very much. We also express sincere gratitude for the pivotal roles played by PBCJ and the JIS in broadcasting the event live, widening the reach of the information shared. Yes, round of applause for our partners in the media. The hospitality of the UWI regional headquarters in hosting this event, which enabled fruitful discussions and collaboration. And remember that we're going to open the coffee break after the event. So I know that more collaboration will happen there as you talk about the data that you have had the opportunity to bite into. We also are grateful for the collective effort of the multi-agency launch planning committee comprising representatives from PIOJ, Statin, IDB, UNICEF, and the Ministry of Education and Health, and our event coordinator, Dana Wallace, in meticulously planning this launch. Round of applause for that team too. Now, the ushers, for those in the room, have cards with the QR code to get a digital copy of the report. And they also have hard copies of the report available. And I like that they do that because the access is so important. And I know I have some colleagues who will say, no, I read everything still printed. Some of us will read online, but some of you want to go in with your pen on the paper. Good. So for further details and to access the full report online, we encourage you to download the document via the link provided in the description box below our YouTube video, or by scanning the QR code that is now on screen for you again. This event's recording is available for viewing on YouTube platforms including GIS TV, PBC Jamaica, UNICEF Jamaica, and the PIOJ, ensuring ongoing access to these valuable discussions and findings. Ladies and gentlemen, as we cherish our children, the future's foundation, our collective focus remains on their protection and growth. We're grateful you could join us today. Thank you. My name is Kamisha Swaby, wishing you a fantastic rest of the day and a fantastic rest of the week.